Hi guys, welcome to JP Bashed. Today's video we're going to do a little bit on camber and toe settings. We're not going to go into real detail on this because it's a bit of a minefield once you start getting into all the different things you got to look at, droop and caster settings and other things. So we're just primarily going to concentrate on a quick way to sort of just check your camber and set up maybe your toe for how you want the car to handle. So I would recommend the toe setting, which is how the car drives in a straight line, how the front wheels are lined up basically. I would probably suggest a very slight outward toe if you're going to be bashing. This will give you better cornering, quicker steering, will make the car slightly less easy to drive. If you're an absolute novice, then you should probably put some negative toe on and point the wheels, if you like, inwards. So let's start with the camber and then we'll go on to some of the toe settings after. Now there are gauges that you can buy to do camber settings. This is one that we've picked up. It's an RPM one that we picked up from Wheelspin. I think we got this primarily for the Nitro car, so it's a little bit small, but you've got a little gauge on here and it tells you what degrees you want to set it in. So the wheel as it is now, you can see on here, you might be able to see it points very slightly from the top this way. That is what we call a negative camber. If you want it absolutely zero camber at all, it would sit absolutely square on the ground. And if you've got positive camber, the wheel at the top would point outwards like this. Okay, so for bashing, I would say you want a little bit of negative camber. If you want to do speedruns, ideally you want to get this as flat as possible. Now it does make it a lot harder to drive if it's flat, but you're going to get more speed because you've got better contact on the tyre, less resistance. The negative camber, you haven't got full contact of the tyre on the ground whilst you're driving. Something else you've got to bear in mind is that when the suspension squats, the camber changes. So now with the suspension down, the car's moving forward, it's squatted down, the wheel is actually gone into a neutral position, if you like. If you've already got a positive camber on that wheel and it squats, and potentially it can push that even further out. So it is something you've got to bear in mind. Anyway, let's have a little go at checking it. Let's set this gauge up then. So I would say you want probably a negative camber of about 92 degrees. So if we put that at 2 degrees, and we'll do it this way, and then we'll do it the way that I normally do it, which is a bit of doing it by eye. But important thing, you need flat ground to do this properly, and that's one thing that I would recommend. And then what you really want to do, they recommend, a lot of people or manufacturers, that you drop the car from 12 inches up, but if you basically just push the car down and let go of it, it will find like a natural seated position. So if we get this camber gauge, you can clearly see it's not big enough for the wheel. It should sit up here. So in effect, this gauge is pretty much useless for this 1/8 scale monster truck. However, we do have a set square, which will give you a perfect 90-degree line. And what you want to do is put this at the base of the wheel so it just touches, and then as you can see at the top of here you have a gap, and that gap is basically giving me about a 92-degree camber. Set it. So if we put this, let's see if we can line this up so you can see what 90 2 degrees looks like. So, and you can see that it probably wants to sit a little bit more like there. You can see there's a couple of mils sticking past that direction, which gives you a negative camber. So on this particular wheel here, we want to put it in the centre of the tyre, just so it touches at the bottom, and you can see we've got a little gap. Now, I personally would just try and mimic, using the set square, mimic that gap all the way around the vehicle. So if we move over to the other wheel at the back, and we do the same again, I can tell you already that this has got more negative camber than the other wheel. Now, I don't know why that's happened, because it was all set up identical. I don't know if you can see that, but that gap, so I can get this camera in the right place, is considerably more than the other side. It's quite a bit more actually. So yeah, things you've got to watch out for with your camber are, obviously this is where you adjust it, the upper arms, that's your main camber adjustment. You could have an issue with a hinge pin that's bent. If you move this line here, it's going to move the angle of the wheel. You could have a problem with the shock if it's not sitting across here. The same on both sides. But ultimately, on this occasion, I've jumped this car really high at the weekend. Last time I took it out, 50 odd foot in the air. It may have bent something slightly or changed something slightly, I don't know, but that wheel definitely looks to me like it's got a lot more camber than the other ones. Now I suppose we could get a ruler if you like, and you could literally put the ruler from the edge of your straight line to the front. Now you want to make sure when you measure it, you're measuring it to the same tread pattern. You can do that just by turning the wheel around into the right position, and you can literally measure from a point anywhere. It doesn't really matter where you measure it, as long as it's the same point, but measure it from there to the ruler, to the straight line, and then make sure that you've got that same gap all the way around. Okay, so if we have a look then again at this rear wheel, I've got the set square in the centre of the tyre, of the wheel. That's important. We've pushed down on the car, it's returned to its squatted position where it would sit. The bottom of the set square is just touching, very lightly touching the actual tyre. And then we've got a ruler here. I don't know how easily I'm going to get this in here. This is any problem. You probably do better do with a short ruler. It's definitely not going in there, but I can do it from here. And I'm going to use the tread in the centre of the tyre. I'm going to put that smack bang in the middle of there, and I'm going to touch it up. That's on 10 centimetres, and that's finished there at 150. Okay, so there's 5 centimetres on that one. If we go on to the other side, put it into the centre, gently touch it up against the tyre, get the ruler again, measure from the centre, and that's 45. So you can see that there's a 5mm difference. There's 5mm of extra negative camber on that wheel, so we need to reduce that. So the way that you would reduce that, or I would reduce that anyway, is by using this turnbuckle down here. Now, turnbuckles have got a little line on them somewhere. Each one's slightly different. However, they all will have some kind of mark, as you can see there. So that mark normally on most turnbuckles will indicate the direction of which way you need to wind it for it to close or to open. So if I wind this turnbuckle back towards me, which would be clockwise, going from the outside of the car in, that will reduce the gap Now, as we've got too much camber, we actually want to open that arm up and take 5 degrees off. In theory, the gap that you have between there and there should be, in a perfect world, absolutely identical on both sides. And if that was the case, then your camber should be the same. However, because the tolerances on these cars isn't great, some stuff can be slightly bent, the way things are machined, screws sitting through certain parts of the car, whether bushes are worn or not, it doesn't particularly work doing it that way. It's a good indicator and it will get you very close, but for fine tuning I would suggest that you actually measure. So let's have a go at adjusting the camber. So I've turned the car around the other way to try and make it a little easier to film. So a lot of people use like proper turnbuckle spanners. I find the ones I've had have been quite weak and they just open up, and I think it's easier sometimes just to use an adjustable spanner. So I'm going to put the adjustable spanner around the turnbuckle, and then I'm just going to tighten it up, and then we're going to give it a couple of turns. It just slipped off. There we go. And then we're going to check. So we're just going to give that a quick check now. So push down on the car, make sure it returns to the seating position. I can already see by eye that that camber has reduced. Make sure that that's in the correct position. Get your ruler, put it in the centre, and we were at 50 before, and that is pretty much almost bang on 45. So if we check the other side again, just to make sure, push the car down, let it return to its natural seating position. And the problem with this is if you haven't got completely flat ground, you can be chasing your own tail doing this. So I would advise that it's not necessarily critical to get this absolutely 100%. As long as you've got a little bit of negative camber for what you're doing as a basher, you'll be absolutely fine. And that is a terrible way to measure that. I can't seem to get the ruler into the right place. Let's just move this over a little bit. There's never enough room, is there? Right, so make sure the car's seat is into the position that you want it in, because another way they do it is just drop it from about 12 inches up onto the floor. Put your gauge onto your tyre. Measure it this way because it's easier. The centre of that wheel to there, that's saying 41, 2, 43, 44 on that side. So we want to get the other side about the same. Push it down. Let's just drop it. There you go. Put your gauge back on. And that's on 46. So basically, you just want to give that a little bit of a turn. And here, I'd say about to there, and then what I want to do is when you turn it, it actually will turn the end against the hub, and I don't like that. So what I will do is get this and just put it back into the centre. Right. Let's give that a measure and see what it's saying. Be careful with this ruler because it's a scale ruler. measuring drawings, and you can easily make a mistake with it. Right. That's saying 46. So I need to turn that a bit more. And what you can do, if you want, which is a bit of a pain when you're trying to film it, is you can actually hold this so it doesn't twist. Not that I can show you. Right, let's have a look and see where we're at with that. Drop the car. I can see now already that that gap is looking a lot closer to the other side. So, ruler. And that is 44. So I'm happy with that. And if you look at the car, not that you probably see it very well in the video, they do look, when they're sitting, pretty much the same now. So that's the back done, and that's basically how you adjust the camber. I'll do the same process on the front to make sure that the front is in the same ballpark. I don't know why I always twist this rule around. So that is absolutely bang on 44. So that is perfect. It doesn't need to be adjusted. And we shall do the same on this side. And this is looking like it's possibly going to need a little bit of adjustment on this one. Let's move the car over. Give it a bit of a drop. Centre of the wheel, yeah, that's looking better already. Get the ruler on. Sorry about the filming. I'm finding it a little bit difficult every time I take my hands off the camera, it falls, and that's what's that saying? It's on just under, it's saying 43.5. I'm happy with that because of the difference in the ground and stuff. So yeah, that's basically how you I set anyway my camber up on my monster truck. Negative camber, 92 degrees, jobs are good. And so the toe in, toe out is a little bit more difficult to get precise. I found this with doing the speed running. What I actually found with this vehicle in particular, to get it to go in a straighter line, I did actually have to adjust the steering link to get it to work much better. I was having problems with both of my MT8s. I adjusted this steering link and it made such a massive difference to how the car went in a straight line. So like I said, speed running, you want it completely parallel, which would mean that these wheels point exactly in parallel with these wheels on this side. You can't adjust the toe settings on the back. The MT8 as well, this wheel here always looks like it points inwards more, and I think that's a common thing. Everybody who's ever had one of these always seems to say, I think there's a problem with my rear wheel. Well, I just think there's a problem with all of them because they are all exactly the same. But anyway, what I would do now is I would straighten these wheels manually the best I can. And what you've got to remember when you're doing this is there is, as you can see, movement in these wheels. So it's very difficult to be very precise. But a good indicator that I've always found, which helps make sure that the wheels are sort of pointing in the right direction, is straighten these up the best you can. So the good way to actually do that would be to look at the position of where the steering rack is, and you really want that steering rack to be, the centre of the steering rack wants to be smack bang in the centre of the car. That way your Ackerman or your steering rack, you know, is pointing in the right direction, and you know it's set as straight that should be straight on your servo as well. Now, you've got to remember when you turn your power on, is this servo will point in the straight position. So wherever that arm points, when your servo is turned on, you need to adjust this arm here to make sure that that steering rack or ackerman down there sits exactly evenly down the centre of the vehicle. That way then you know when you turn the power on and the servo lines up, that arm moves into position, that steering rack is even. Then in theory, your steering turnbuckles, which are these ones on the back here and here, again in theory you should have an exactly equal amount between there and there for the wheels to be set at the same toe, whether that's parallel, negative toe or positive toe. So I've set the wheels up so the steering rack is pointing straight. I'm then going to use this tread as a bit of a guidance. If you get the ruler and you get it so it's sort of pointing straight down the tread, pushed up against it, I can see at the other end where the ruler sits onto the tyre. So in theory, if you do the same on this side, push it up against the tread and then point it onto the wheel, you'll get a rough idea where the wheels sit. It's a little bit tricky doing it that way. In an ideal world, you just want a camber machine like they use for your car, but we haven't got that. So you can try different places on the tyres and see where the ruler sits. You can do it on both sides and you can get an idea for where your steering's at. But ultimately you've got to get that ackerman straight and the wheels straight, and then you want to adjust them here. And again, it's very simple. Toe in is when the wheels point inwards like that, toe out is when they point like that, and obviously parallel is when they're dead straight. It's exactly the same to adjust that as it is to adjust the camber. It will also have a line of some description. These are Arrma turnbuckles and they are shaped rather than having a line on. So I would say on this one it's shaped inwards that way, so I would say if we turn that away from us clockwise towards the wheel, that will wind it in, which will give us, it will make the vehicle toe out. Okay guys, so that's pretty much it for today really. I just want, so yeah guys, I don't want to get into it too much today. There are different settings that you can do on different cars. For example, you can adjust where your shocks sit, which is what your droop is. That's how far your lower arm will be at an angle, or flatter if you like. There's caster settings. There's some vehicles you can really fine tune them. I've got an Arrma Typhon TLR that's got inserts where the hinge pins and the arms go, the upper arms sit into, and that allows you to really fine tune the suspension setup, and it can get quite complicated, to be fair. This is just a basic tutorial if you like, to help people get a better understanding of the basics, which is just your camber and being able to adjust your toe on your steering. And that's understanding what it is. Toe is your steering, and that is how the wheels are pointing, in what direction your steering wheels are, and your camber is your angle of your wheel. So that's it for today guys. I've got to say a big shout out to OP Bashed and Drew. You know you're in the house, Drew the man. Thank you very much for that 100 subscription that we got today. So yeah, just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's subscribed to the channel, and yeah, please keep watching, and comment if you want to see anything in particular, and I'll see what I can do. Thanks guys, take care, bye for now.